What's going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the California Underground. I have with me gubernatorial candidate Reinette Senum. Did I get that correct? I was practicing before. I nailed it. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
She is running for California governor. Primaries are only a couple days away, so we're going to talk about how important the primaries are. We got a lot to talk about. I was going over her site. She's got a lot of stuff to talk about. Very comprehensive. She knows her stuff. One of the big things about her, she's running as a no party preference, an independent. She is not a Democrat. She's not a Republican. And a lot of people were DMing me saying, you really need to talk to her. She's got a lot of great ideas. So I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen. Reinette, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Great. I'm doing great. Thank you. That's a great opening. It's one of the better openings I've ever seen on an interview. Good job.
Oh, thanks. Well, you do enough of them. Hopefully you get better at them. So let's start off with, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from. I was looking over your page. You have a long timeline of sort of activism and community engagement and involvement. Why don't we start there and talk about how you got involved, how you got to this point?
So I'm actually currently right now in my hometown, Nevada City, California. I was raised in this county, Nevada County, California, since I was 4. Lived in LA for 8 years and Utah and Alaska, respectively. But I got engaged in community work. And in 2004, at the time, I was concerned with the state of the planet, which I laugh and say, well, it kind of looks like the good old days now. But I was really concerned about where we were going. And I thought, well, what can I do on one person? You know, how can I possibly do any good? And then I realized, well, I'll just focus on my own community, start in your own backyard. So I got very involved in building up resiliency and self-reliancy in this community. And then I was doing a lot of work with the city council, realizing they were very reactive rather than proactive. So in 2008, I decided to run for city council, and I got the most votes at the time, became the vice mayor the first year, the mayor the second year. It was a 4-year term, and it was fantastic. I spent that first 4 years being very proactive. Started the first organic farmers market in the county, started a extreme weather shelter for the homeless, an advocacy organization for the homeless called Sierra Roots, got solar on our city-owned buildings. I was averaging about 2,000 hours a year in volunteer work. And even as mayor and council member, never got paid. We don't get paid. It's all volunteer. And I thought I was done. I was just trying to, make a better world, starting with my own town. And then I got off the council, but I was still highly engaged. And that time really working towards kind of teaching people about the importance of a town square. We lost a lot of our town squares in America with the advent of highways. They went through cities and towns and took out town squares everywhere. And so we're really working on just kind of creating that sense of place in one of our more blighted streets. And then as we approach 2016, we're getting a lot more outside threats. And that was like, from the state, from our county, from corporations. And there's this one thing called Trans-Pacific Partnership that looked like it was going to be rolling in, that Obama was pushing, that was just going to absolutely just eviscerate local control and authority and environmental protections and worker rights. It was not pretty at all. And so I wanted to jump back on the council because I knew how to stand my ground. I mean, I can go out there and I can model and I can lead and find creative solutions. I'm very good at that. But I can also get in the ring and I can fight and I can push back. And so I ran again. I was reelected in 2016. By that time, the world had changed a lot. It was really much more intense, a lot more incoming missiles. Paradise, not too far from us, burned down a few months after I was on the council. And, we're having a lot of issues with homeowners insurance policy cancellations and the rise of homelessness. And then Pacific Gas and Electric was taking down our power for days and days at a time and just destroying some businesses. And then I was mayor when COVID hit. And what happened was I was fine with the initial stay-at-home orders. We're going only off of predictive models. That's all we had. I was encouraging people wear masks until we know more. And then what happened was once we got beyond the predictive models and we began to look at actual data, it wasn't as bad as we originally thought. And by that time, we'd all been relegated to Zoom, city council meetings, and we were having a weekly Zoom call with our county health departments, city and county officials. And at that point in time, when the data started to come in, I was like, well, hey guys, this is good. It's not as bad as we thought it was going to be. And I started to notice that they were not adjusting their cells whatsoever. And I began to ask questions like, hey, what's the goal here? What are we measuring? What's the metrics? Like, what's the end point? And finally, I was told by one of our doctors on the Zoom call that until we have 0 cases, we could expect more of the same. And I said, when do we ever have 0 cases of anything ever?
Yeah.
And so it was starting to make my stomach turn, because I knew how government worked by that time. I knew it was kind of the normal protocol, and there's just some really weird things happening. Then in June, Newsom did a statewide mask mandate. I was the only elected official in the whole entire state of California to call him out and say, you do not have unilateral power to go out there and make laws. And this is a very slippery slope. We should all be alarmed. And it was just, I received the wrath of God. You know, LA Times, who I now know is basically owned, and the San Diego Union Tribune too, is owned by the same person who's basically a CCP foot soldier. Soon Seong is his name. And the SF Gate and SACB just eviscerated me, you know, saying I was saying masks don't work. I'm like, I'm not talking about the efficacy of masks. I'm talking about the power of the governor and what he can and cannot do. And so finally, and it was now July. I had just won my third election. I'm ready to step down and take oath for the third term. And my partner, Susan, of 14 years, was saying, are you going to be able to do this? You know, and I said to her, I don't know how I'm going to be able to shut up, because I'm seeing a lot of disturbing things, and this is not okay with me. And I know who I am, and I know I'm not going to just shut up and just go along to get along. So instead of taking the oath, I stepped down in July of 2020. And I actually called my city council out for committing crimes against humanity. I'm like, look it, I've got this information, you've got this information, and yet you continue to do what you're doing, and you're actually causing harm. And I called them out, and the only thing by then that I could think to do was to start my own YouTube channel called Reinette Senum Chew on This, and bring these different respective experts in their fields, you know, virologists, epidemiologists, OSHA experts, to talk about and share the information the public was not getting. And that is the role of an elected official, is to keep the public informed. That's what they should be doing. So I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to do that and not bring the heat onto my city hall staff. So not being on the council any longer gave me the ability to do that. Then I was on the Del Big Trees, the high wire. And when that happened, you know, people across the state, because it was right when the recall was getting going, like, hey, you should run for governor. And I was like, I'm not running for governor. That is never happening. And what happened was I continued to watch Newsom, what he was doing, what the elected officials weren't. Nobody was questioning him. Nobody was questioning the narrative. Nobody was pointing out. We were trying to get the vital statistics, the real data that was now closed down to the public, which was completely illegal. And the ones who were asking me to run, I finally said, look, at this whole governorship, you know, I'm willing to run, but there's two requirements. First of all, I'm not going to do just more of the same. You got plenty of candidates for that. But I will do is I want to run with no party affiliation. I had been a no party affiliate candidate for almost 10 years. It was just something I just started to do. And I said, so no party affiliation, because I cannot serve the people in a party simultaneously. Both parties are equally completely controlled by big corporate money. And the next thing is, as I said, you know, I've been in the trenches for almost 20 years. And I've been asking, like, what's our goal as a society? You know, what are we leaving behind for our children? And how do I measure my leadership and the decisions I'm making? And I said, what I'd like to do is actually fold in what's called the 7th generation principle, which is every decision we make today should serve 7 generations from now. And that actually comes from, amazingly enough, it actually comes from our Constitution. It ends up that the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy inspired our forefathers into writing this thing called the Constitution. But there's these 2 important components they left out of this incredible vessel. One was the anchor, the other was the compass. And the compass was a 7 generation principle. The anchor were our elders. They had this, you know, a circle, a committee of elder, you know, women, essentially, grandmothers. And rather than we today, you know, sending our elders off to nursing homes, they used to fold the wisdom of the wisdom in of the elders from the last 2 generations to ensure for the next 7. And so this campaign is very much about the 7 generation principle. It is very much about, you know, those intergenerational connections. And it's also about an economy based upon restoration and healing. And so at that time, as you may know, on my website, there is a almost 30-page contract with Californians. It is a blueprint for California. It is a pathway forward. I'm the only candidate that has anything like it. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted, I didn't want to pull a Pelosi where you have to vote for the bill in order to find out what's in it. I wanted people to know, who are you voting for, right? I'm going to just lay it out there. And this contract with Californians is a living document, which means it's never static. I've been up and down the state, thousands of miles up and down for months and months. And so the brilliant ideas, the concepts, the models, the experts, we've just been folding that into the contract. And there's more to come, actually. And so this is where we are today. And so I've been up and down the state, And I have to say that we are less divided than people realize. There's a rule of thumb. 80% of people agree with 90% of the issues we are experiencing. That is the truth. And no matter what, I've told people, it does not matter the outcome of this election. This campaign has been created in such a way, it supersedes election cycles. This is about creating a cultural, even spiritual shift within California and how we show up in our leadership. So no matter what happens, this campaign is actually going to continue. And we can get into that later.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. You brought up a lot of stuff. And just for geography's sake, let's see if I can point it out. Nevada City is like up in like this area.
Yeah, right.
Right
Yeah,
here.
you look more towards Tahoe. So it's above, it's northeast. Yeah, right up there.
Okay, I had to look it up because it is one of those cities that, California is so big. We often forget that there is a large amount of people who live outside of the bubbles, the urban bubbles of, I mean, I live in San Diego, so I'm in one of the three bubbles, San Diego, LA, San Francisco. It's always those three bubbles seem to determine so much of politics in California, but there is just an enormous amount of land and people out there in California in terms of variety. I'm looking out at behind you you have beautiful greenery and trees behind you. Down here in the desert, it's a completely different scenery. And I think that's something that's overlooked in California politics, is that there is a large swath of citizenry and diversity in this state, that it's not just what the hipsters are saying down in an LA coffee shop. We have to talk about the farmers. We have to talk about people who live in the state of Jefferson, as people like to call it, people who live in the Inland Empire. There's a lot of diversity. I feel like a lot of those voices go unheard. And there is a lot of frustration in California if we just feel like we're not represented because the cities kind of control California.
Well, the cities, and to be honest, even more so the legislators, the lobbyists, the corporations, I mean, we blame it on the cities and the voting, but the truth of the matter is a lot of the legislation that's pushed through does not even represent the people in the cities at all. Yeah. Right? They might vote a certain way, but then you have the legislators coming in, and while we're over here, the legislators are making decisions and writing bills over here. So, when it comes down to it, first of all, I love the diversity of California. And I don't care if you're a Republican or from the Jefferson state or the state of Jefferson, or, you're, a Latino or, gay. I'm, a gay woman, been in a relationship for 14 years with my partner, Susan. I love the diversity of California. This is what makes us so beautiful and strong. But the truth is that 80% of people agree on 90% of the issues is very true. And really what people want is they want to know they can pay their bills. They can put food on the table. Their children have a good education. They're safe in their communities. They have clean, and access to clean water and food and soil and air. And that's about it. I mean, we don't really want a lot. We just like to go about our lives and know we're going to be okay. And so, because I've been up and down the state, I've been talking to all these different people, and I'm a good talker, but I can also listen really well, and I know how to put it into motion. And as you could probably see on my electreinette.com page, there's my service. You'll see I've done a lot, and this is, just I listen and I go and I try to clear the path from point A to point B. And so, what we did is with this contract with Californians, we looked at the biggest challenges facing California, and we turned them into our biggest opportunities. So this blueprint is really laying out an economy based upon restoration and healing, and that means rebuilding the topsoil, which is huge. It sounds like 80% of our environmental issues, rebuilding our topsoil, right? You actually allow the rainwater to be collected into the aquifers and they recharge. It rebuilds the topsoil or the pollinator population. It makes more nutritionally dense food. Also reduces catastrophic fires. The list goes on. So it's rebuilding our topsoil, rebuilding our pollinator, ensuring that we can transfer a lot of our big ag to more regenerative farming, expand and also ensure legacy farms and ranches, make sure we have actually intelligent and fair and equitable water distribution. And, so it's really, the objective is to actually take those threats and then work them to our benefit. And then, which is my favorite part, is many people will say, well, how do you pay for this? Well, it ends up that I was looking at, of course, public banks. And that's been on the board of, the table for discussion for a long time. And I found out that California does have a public bank called the Infrastructure Bank, the iBank, and it's for infrastructure jobs like bridges and levees and roads and so on. But it's underutilized, and it's really more like a slush fund for our politicians. And I realized that if we were really smart, we could actually expand the charter of this bank, and we can actually expand it to actually, for mom and pop businesses, Main Street businesses, small to large manufacturing. And the beauty of this is that rather than us going to big banks in Wall Street to print the dollars to make the loans, we're doing it as a state, and we're keeping hundreds of millions of dollars in interest rates within the state and the local economies. But this is my favorite part, is what we can do is we can use that infrastructure bank, and we can incentivize the seventh generation principle. We can incentivize regenerative farming and being kinder to the planet and ensuring that our resources are there for generations to come. And we can do that in a way where we create a list of criteria, right? A list of criteria where the more you check off, the lower your interest rates. So, okay, you want to have manufacturing, you want to have a farm. All right, make sure that your buildings are energy efficient. They're doing, gray water systems, recycling their water. It could be also ensuring that you're rebuilding your topsoil, planting pollinator plants and flowers. If you're a farmer, you're transitioning from kind of the big ag practices to the regenerative farming. And the more you check off those lists, right, those items on the list, the lower your interest rate. So it's not like we're forcing it down your throat, but we're incentivizing it. People love that. They love the idea that we are the ones lending the money. We're the ones keeping the interest rate dollars, here. And we're also doing in such a way that we're incentivizing a really beautiful planet for, future generations to come.
Two things I want to kind of touch upon. And I think they're both important points. Is you brought up this idea that 80% of people really agree on a lot of these, what I call kitchen table politics. I actually just did a live for Coffee and California Politics. I think it was not this past week, but 2 weeks ago. And the title of it was, "We're Not as Different as People Think We Are." I had gone up to San Francisco that weekend prior, staying with a friend of my wife's. And my wife told me, she said, don't get into politics because, you guys are on like opposite ends of the spectrum. So don't talk to her about politics. And we, for most of the time we just chatted. We had a great time. We had a lot of things in common. We did veer into politics at some point, but it turned out we actually had a lot of things in common. And there was a lot of this common ground of, we're tired of the political class and we're tired of the political elite. And remember at one point she said, "I just want politicians to do what's best for California." And I'm tired of seeing just big money run Sacramento and all this stuff. And it's stuff that I think everybody can get behind. And it's funny because if you just kind of put these two people in a room, you'd say, oh, there's no way these two would ever see eye to eye on anything. But when you kind of break it down and get down to it, there is this common ground that I think a lot of Californians are really gravitating towards. And if we just start to talk to each other, there will be more progress. And it's almost like they don't want people to talk in California. Just keep it sectioned.
It's an illusion. This illusion that we're separated is absolutely just not true. And so let's talk about, this is really important. So let's talk about why is it that this just keeps reoccurring over and over. We get these elected officials that represent us. So there's a whole host of reasons that I've now been seeing firsthand. It's like, wow, what an eye opener. So first and foremost, the primary election, which is coming up on June 7th, we have the mail-in ballots, for 30 days. You can, you have time to mail it in. I recommend do not mail in your ballots. Go to your elections office if you can, drop them off. Don't drop them off in boxes on the streets or the corners. Those are actually owned by corporations. Crazy. But drop them off. But understand that we have come to believe that the general election is the most important election out of the two. The primary, which is there's 26 candidates. It's open primary. You can vote for any candidate of your preference. Does not matter to the party. And the top two vote getters then move on to the general election in November. And we always think that the general election is the most important election, but that's not true. The die is cast by the time you get through that primary election. And what we now know is that, like, for instance, in the 2018 election, there's 40 million Californians, 22 million of them are registered. And in that 2018 election, only 7 million voted. Out of the, only 7 million, right? And so 15 million people just didn't vote in the primary, thinking it wasn't important. And what's really fascinating is only 2.3 million voted for Newsom. 2.3 million people voted for Newsom out of 40 million people, out of 22 million registered voters. So we think he's like, there's a mandate, people love him. And that was at the height of his popularity. So the thing is, though, is that what happens in the primary, and this is important, the media gives it very little coverage. There's a reason. They want you disenfranchised. They don't want you informed. They want you to say, I don't know, it's too big. I don't know who the candidates are. It's too much for me. And what happens is that it's the extreme left and right who generally vote in the primary. They're the ones hitting and setting the ball up at the net. So here are the two extremes on either side. They're the ones who generally vote in the primary. Then those 80%ers we've been talking about, here comes the general election. It's now November, and they're looking at the two candidates and they're like, this is it. I have to pick the lesser of two evils. These are the two candidates. And it's like, well, why? It's like, why? Because you didn't vote in the primary. Why did you vote in the primary? Because the media is not really letting you know. And when the media does let you know, they do it in such a way like, Newsom's in, he's a shoo-in, he's got no competition. Yeah, there's an election, but Newsom's got it again. So they just really disenfranchise people from voting. And that is by design.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I've said that numerous times. And I always tell my listeners, I always say, look, if you're tired of your choices and you think it's always the same people, or you wonder why you get to the general and go, why, I only have two Democrats to pick from. Why do I always have two Democrats to pick from? Well, because you probably fell asleep at the wheel during the primaries and you have no idea who's running, and you have no idea, you didn't choose who your ideal candidate was in the beginning. And that's sort of incumbent on you as a voter to fault that you fell asleep at the wheel. And now you have these two awful choices. And you think it's the system, you think it's this two-party system, which in a way it is. I mean, you have the Democrats and you have the Republicans, they endorse their candidates. I saw a poll from the LA Times just today. They said, but right behind Newsom is Brian Dahle, who got endorsed by the California GOP. He's, of course, got 10%. He's the only other person with double digits. And so you'll likely get these two choices. But in reality, it's like if you were paying attention during the primaries, you could radically change it. And it doesn't have to be these two choices. And it doesn't even have to be Gavin Newsom if it was that right.
No, it does not.
It could be the top two choices without Gavin Newsom.
And I have to tell you something. Okay, so this is the thing. If a Republican wins, makes it through the primary, with, let's say, along with Newsom, they've actually handed the general election and the next 4 years over to Newsom. He has won. Mm-hmm. Dahle doesn't have a chance in hell of making it. Mm-hmm. He is the establishment. He is a Republican. He's just more of the same, actually. Both Newsom and he are more of the same, but Newsom's got the whole Pelosi family and so on, right? He's actually a little bit more crazy. But it's not going to work. And the thing is that people have to understand is when I hear say, well, my vote doesn't count, it's just being rigged anyway. It's like, well, look at it. If you don't vote, you have to understand the fewer people who vote, the easier it is to rig. And that's why the media doesn't want you voting in the primary, because it's really easy to finagle an election if few people vote, right? If you have 2,000 people voting, instead of, let's say, having 10 million people voting, right? It's easy to jerry rig with the fewer votes. So it's really it's a setup for failure. And the other thing is, it's really important. And I say to people, and this includes Dahle, this includes Newsom, this includes the other top contenders, is that you've got to look to see who their donors are. And that even goes for a declined to state candidate. Before, the big money was always in left and right, but now they're actually investing in a particular candidate right now, big corporate money, because they realize that people are in the middle and they're pissed off with both sides. For the first time, corporate money has now infiltrated the declined to state, the no party affiliate candidate. So I say to people, it's worth your time to go onto votersedge.org and actually look at the candidates to see who their top donors are. Do a little Googling. You can kind of see who's got the most, like the top 5-6 candidates. See who's got, the most endorsements. Look behind to see who's the money behind the endorsements. What media outlet is giving them coverage. Who is the money behind the media outlet? And people are like, well, I don't have time for this. I'm like, well, you may not have time for this, but you don't realize the hell you're going to go through for the next 4 years if we continue doing more of the same. And right now, as it currently stands, this is the most important election in the state of California. And luckily with my campaign, we've got a plan B. we've known from the get-go this probably would be the case with all this money infiltration and the candidates playing certain roles and stuff, and in an illusion of choice. It's an illusion of choice. Because right now, I have to tell you something, I have never in my life seen the censorship like I'm seeing here and experiencing every single day of this campaign. We're getting more and more ratcheted. It really started on January 10th, where they took down my Instagram account for no reason, no warning. Just my actual campaign account took it down. But now what's happening is that they are absolutely, you can't post my posts. You can't share them off my social media, most of them. Many times they don't work. The hashtags don't work. We also now have been telling people, like when they put something up and they share it in the stories or whatever, they're taken down within a few hours. We also know for a fact that amazingly, somebody told us they were on the AOL chat room, which I did not know existed. And they put my name, not a link, not my website, but my name. And this, you've violated community standards because of my name. Now what's happening is that we've even gone to the Secretary of State to get the voter rolls, right? We paid for them. It's available to us. We've never gotten them. The voter rolls are so we can actually go out there and communicate with all the voters. They're not sending it to us. My favorite part is that we've gone to Facebook and Google for weeks and weeks and weeks now saying, hey, we'd like to do some political ads, please. And they're like, oh, we don't do political ads. We're like, yes, you do. We're seeing Newsoms, we're seeing Schellenbergers, we're seeing Treminos. You do political ads, but they're not letting us do Tremino, or doing political ads. And now what's happening, and this is amazing, is in the last week or so, we have attempted, as we've done in the past, to use what's called Klaviyo. It's an email service, right? And now even a Microsoft Office email service. And a few days ago, we sent out 30,000 emails, 15, not 15,000, 15 emails got out. We can't send them out. We've now done a different email software. We're not allowed to send out emails to voters. This is like communism. This is like CCP kind of censorship. This is, I don't care if you're left or right, whatever you are, everybody should be equally concerned, because I say to people, how could you possibly have a fair and equitable election if you can't hear from the candidates to begin with? And so there has been a clear assault on this campaign to absolutely silence us. So now we've resorted to 50 digital billboards around Southern California and the Bay Area to say, who is Reinette Senum? The media hates her, the people love her. Why aren't you hearing from Reinette Senum, the most censored candidate? Which is true. I'm pretty sure I'm probably the most censored candidate out there. And I know why, because I have a 20-year track record. I've been an elected official, but not a career politician. I never got paid. I'm a solutionarian. I find solutions. I know I have experience testifying before the Congress and Assembly, calling out corruption, pushing back, and I know politics. I've been in this fight for a long time, and I have solutions. I actually have a blueprint for California, a tangible, this is the way forward. So no doubt there's a reason why they're censoring me, but we should be highly, highly alarmed that a candidate such as myself can be silenced like this.
And isn't it ironic that the open primary, the jungle primary as they call it, was passed because they believed it would be better for people to have choice and allow people to choose whoever they want. It should just be the top two.
Before it was the top three.
Well, now it's just the top two. And now it's gotten to a point where you don't really get a choice of the top two. You get a choice of the same party. Most of the time you get a choice of two Democrats, or you get a choice of a Democrat and possibly a Republican who's going to get blown out 70-30. It's not even going to be a race. So it's almost like they passed this open primary under the guise of progressivism. And actually, I'm reading a really interesting book right now by Murray Rothbard called The Progressive Era, and how they passed a lot of this these progressive policies to expand the power of the state and the power of the corporate power in conjunction with each other, corporatism. And now we're basically just getting a one-party state. We're not getting choice. We're getting a one-party state of you can choose from Democrat who is very, very radical left, or you can choose from Democrat who is a few ticks maybe to the right, or establishment Republican who was endorsed by the California GOP. So I find that ironic, and people like yourself don't have that ballot, or they just don't have that access to get out there and get their voice heard.
No, and because the media is colluding, 100%. And I'll give you an example. So you got social media, you got the technocrats, Then and they're all in collusion because they're all paying Paul and Peter and blah blah blah, and and they're lobbying for each other, and I mean it's just all patting each other on the back. It's one big happy club. But the San Diego Tribune a couple of weeks ago, I put in a Q&A answers that they were asking from candidates. There was 6 of us out of 26 who did this. And the Soon Seong, who is the Patrick Soon Seong, who is a owner of the San Diego Union Tribune, also owns the LA Times, has a very murky past. I have no doubt he's a CCP foot soldier. No doubt. We should be really concerned about that in Southern California. And what happened is the LA Times just a few days ago came out with, these are the top 4 most active candidates. And it was Schellenberger, Termino, Sean Collins, and Jenny Ray LaRue. And they just absolutely kept me out. And I'm like, you can't say that I'm not active. I guarantee you I'm even more active than the 4 there, but it's like a psychological warfare. What they did was in San Diego, they let us be there because they're more conservative. They're not too worried about the liberals. But then what they did is they made sure that they had a lot more conservative people with Schellenberger to kind of scare the liberals into voting. Like, oh my gosh, we have all these Republicans, all these conservatives. We got to go out there. We got to vote, and they completely ignored me. And so there's no doubt that they're absolutely in cahoots. There's no reason for not to have included me. Cause I mean, I've been out there, big events, small events, you name it, radio shows, podcasts like this. I mean, hundreds and hundreds. And once again, it's just a censorship. But let me tell you something. We knew this was going to happen. Many, many months ago, I was saying, we're talking back in November, December, January, people were saying, Reinette, who's your biggest competition? I said, my competition is not a person. It's a thing. It's called censorship. I know what's going to happen because I know who I am. I know how the media treats me. I've been through this for a long, long time. So we created this campaign in such a way. Our success is not incumbent upon winning a possibly rigged or highly influenced election. What we're going to do after this election, if I don't get in through the primary, is we're going to turn this campaign into a political PAC. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go out there because we have this incredible base right now of volunteers who are on the ground right now as I speak, promoting with banners over overpasses of highways right now. They know the long game. We've shared it with them. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that contract with Californians that I have. We're going to take key pieces that are really, really important. And we're going to go out there and we're going to return the power to the people, to the California voters, because the legislators are over here serving the big money and the lobbyists. What we're going to do is take certain pieces of this contract with Californians, and we're going to actually, with in mind that 7-generation principle, that's the goal, and we're going to put out a series of referendums, of voter ballot initiatives, propositions that we, the voters, get to vote on. Not the legislators. They don't author the bill. They don't water it down. They don't put little earmarks in there, little things, under the hood that you don't know about until after the fact. It's actually going to be voter driven. And the objective is to actually create a system that serves us now. We get to vote on it. And it also serves 7 generations from now. And that's what this campaign is about. This election cycle is just, to me, almost like a footnote. It is just a one step to a much larger step. Our objective is to actually create a cultural shift and an absolute movement, not just throughout the state of California, but throughout the whole entire United States.
I wanted to talk about this idea of the seven generations. It's an interesting idea. I never heard of it before. And I think it's something that we are, as a society, guilty of in terms of people always say, well, how did we get here? They always say, well, how did this happen? How did we get here? A lot of times it's because people in generations don't think far beyond this year and maybe next year.
Or today.
Or today. And in today's, instant gratification world, could be in the next hour. People don't really care down the line. And this sort of frog in the boiling water where it just slowly but surely things change. And before you know it, you look 20 years back and go, man, 20 years ago was really great. And everything was better. And we used to be able to do this. And our community was well knit. And, these things all worked. Why don't they work anymore? Again, because you probably fell asleep at the wheel or you voted for politicians who were only advertising for problems that are right now and not thinking in the future. And California is a good example. And reservoirs and water are definitely a good example in my mind. I've said that why aren't we creating reservoirs and storing enough for 5 years? Why are we storing barely enough for maybe a couple months if things get hairy or go sideways? we don't have that foresight in California to be like, these bad things happen, natural things happen. There's not much we can do. Storms happen and all that, fires happen, but we could be better prepared for it, and we could better prepare for people down the line so that when it does happen, they'll say, oh, thank God somebody thought about this 5-10 years ago. So,
right. And the thing is that's the case, but there's no incentive for that. So, especially from our politicians, because that's not why they're elected. They're not there to serve something later. They're there to serve themselves, and most of them I think are real kind of psychopaths and sociopaths and egomaniacs. And so the objective is to, my objective was to create a base of incredible people who understand it's very diverse, politically, race, age, you name it. And the objective was to create this incredible base, which we've been able to do. And this is the beauty of COVID. COVID has actually afforded us the ability to go out there. And as a candidate, before COVID, there'd be nowhere to go. You got the Republicans, the Democrats, the DNC, the RNC, and that would be it. Well, because of COVID, there's all these, medical freedom groups and liberty groups and concerned parents and teachers and community members, and they're opening up their living rooms and their backyards and their restaurants, and we're all meeting. And so I've been able to go out there as a no party affiliate. I meet with everyone across all the divides and build up this incredible base. It's an amazing asset that we've established in a matter of just 5 months. They know the long game. The long game I just shared with you, they're all privy to that. They know what we're doing. So they know, I'm trying to get elected, but we know if I don't, it might be better that I'm not, because we actually have a better plan. We're going to go over here and we're going to actually exhaust all avenues. And if we can't do that, then we're going to actually hand the power back to the people, and we're going to write the legislation. We're going to vote on it. And it's not. And the other thing that's really distinctively different about this campaign is when we had other referendums in the past, they're kind of like one over here, but there was never a series of referendums all pointing towards the same goal. Yeah. And that same goal is that 7-generation principle. And it's always out there. The 7-generation principle is always 7 generations out. But that just kind of tells us which way we need to, turn the bow of our boat towards. And then we can, all tack our own way, and we're all tacking towards the same shore. We can kind of get out of each other's business, stop the micromanaging, reduce the red tape and everything. It's like, no, we as a culture are going to do our best to get to that 7-generation, shore. And I have to tell you, people are ready for it. They're ready. They're done.
Yeah, it's one of the silver linings of COVID that I've said before, is that we have this window, especially in California. We have this sort of window that's closing with every day because people get more apathetic. And as COVID sort of goes into the background, people get more apathetic and go back to their nonchalant ways if they don't care what's going on. But we do have this window of people who were woken up out of COVID. When I first started this podcast and I said, I'm going to talk about California politics, just California politics, I had a smattering of people who were interested. They were like, you got your political wonks and your nerds who were interested. COVID exploded in terms of people who were looking and searching for news and information about California politics. They were now engaged. They're asking me questions. What do I do about school board? Should I run? Somebody actually said, based on your podcast, I decided to run for school board because I said I want to get involved. So there is this window that is kind of closing that we have to kind of take advantage of, while there still is political activism, like you're saying, with all these groups that are engaged, they're organizing, they're all over the place. There's so many here in San Diego. I feel like there's a whole bastion of them down here in San Diego. Freedom Revival, San Diego Rise Up, Let Them Breathe, a whole bunch of them. And they're all taking on different causes, which is great. And they're all organizing, but they all work together still as like this big web of like, this org is talking to this org and they're planning out stuff. And then they get a big thing going and it just kind of all melts together. Is that what sort of you're talking about?
Well, yeah, it is. I do think there's been a lot of infiltration, though. I have to tell you, I've seen a lot of infiltration of the evangelical churches into the medical freedom. And I support people's religions. I will fight alongside the evangelical churches and those who have this religion, because that's the beauty of America. We have the right to have our own beliefs. But there's been also a little bit of a divide and a wedge going in there. And so people are kind of trying to force their own will and beliefs on others. And this is when I go back to look at, guys, we're never going to agree on everything. We all have the right to have our own different opinions and religions. And once again, I say, instead of sitting there and having to convince each other I'm right, you're wrong, let's just, readjust the direction of our boat and look at that 7-generation principle and then apply it according to your life. to your beliefs, right? To whatever it is, your community. But the thing is this, is that from what I can tell is going to happen is that more than likely we're going to end up with more of the same unless people show up and vote. So I'm going to go do a plea right now to everyone out there. We're expecting 15 million people not to vote in the primary. And when things go awry, it's because you didn't vote in the primary. So I'm going to ask every one of you who's like, I don't vote primaries, I don't vote at all. Please vote. Take your ballot, fill it out. And then if you can't fill out all of it, at least do the governor race, right? And then drop it off at your election site, your polling site. But the thing is this, is that it is so important that people vote right now and get engaged right now, because from what I can tell, if we don't, we're going to have a lot more suffering. And I think that what's happened is that we haven't suffered enough. People are like, they're kind of getting by enough. It's not that bad. So I think we're going to actually have to go feel some more pain before people really, really wake up. Well, the good news is this. Many, many years ago, when I was working on the resiliency and sustainability in my community, somebody came up to me and they said, Reinette, how are you going to convince everyone to go sustainable? I was like, I'm not convincing anyone to go sustainable, but we have to be ready when people don't have an option any longer. And there's another thing I want to share with people that's really important, is that many years ago in 2011, there was a documentary called Thrive from Foster Gamble. And he was talking about this moment where he heard some really scary news about aerial spraying that was happening over the Bay Area. And he said to his wife, how do I broach this topic with the public without freaking them out and, just making them close down? And she said, well, this is what you do, dear. First you say, oh, look at that bowl of fresh, cool water. And oh, by the way, your hair's on fire. So my point is this, is that I believe people really do know that they're on a sinking Titanic and it's getting bad. But, they're not slipping down the deck fast enough for them to really do something about it. And they just don't know what to do. But what's going to happen is they're going to realize more and more over time, because it's going to continue. This is a war. We're in a war. This is World War III. I'm not going to mince any words. It's a very silent, very sophisticated psychological operation. And the thing is that as people are starting to slide off that deck of the Titanic, it's got to be our job to take that life raft and, dock it next to the side of the boat so they can jump. Because once they see the life raft, they're going to jump. And that's what the 7th-generation principle is. That's what these referendums are going to be. This is going to be the life raft. So I think what's going to happen at this point in time, from what I can tell, people are going to have to feel more pain. And it's like, oh my God, it's like, no, we're in a long game here. This is a long haul. This has been building up for generations. This is not going to just flip with one election anyway. It's not one election. It's not going to save us. One governor is not going to save us. I've always said that. If you think one governor is going to save you, you're delusional. This is all hands on deck. And if I can't be the captain of the boat through the primary, then we're going to do it through the referendum system.
Yeah, that's something I always tell my listeners as well, is they always think, oh, it's going to go one way or the other in one election. It's going to save everybody. And I'm like, it's not. Even if the recall happened and you installed whoever, Larry Elder or Anthony Trimino or any of those guys, it wouldn't have saved California. It would have just stalled whatever action maybe for a little bit longer.
Yeah, maybe. It really we really need the people, right? And we've got to do it in a different way, right? Just more of the same is not going to do it. Going out there and letting the legislators author bills that we don't like, and then us going down to Sacramento and protesting against it over it's not going to do it. It's like we have to take the reins. And our legislators are authoring bills that we don't like. In fact, not only do we not like them, we think they're freaking insane. They're insane bills. They're crazy. It's like, what master are you guys serving? It's not us. It's not your oath of office. So the objective is, and not every state has the luxury that we have, which is the referendums. And so the objective is like, okay, let's take what we have and let's be really, really smart with it.
Yeah. And priorities as well. I mean, you look at some of these bills that they author, people are suffering from high gas prices, and Senator Scott Wiener authored a bill or introduced a bill making it allowable for Bay Area restaurants and nightclubs to stay open till 4 a.m. I guess that's a priority of, again, that goes down to this, a small portion of California is trying to rule over or make laws for everybody else.
It's laughable because the thing is that actually our culture has shifted a lot since COVID. I've talked to bar owners and restaurant owners, and bars and restaurants are closing down earlier than ever before, even in the cities, because we've been so trained to stay home, right, and not go out there. We're not closing the bars down like we used to. 2 o'clock and the bar's empty. So I don't know why. Who can? We got to keep the bars open till 4. Oh, okay, so that's a priority. I mean, who comes up with these things? It's just so arbitrary.
So there is a question that just popped in, and this is a question I often get when I tell people to vote: is how do you convince the "my vote doesn't count" crowd to actually vote?
Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, really, it comes down to explain to them the primaries, how the primaries work, how when they think that, oh, Newsom, you don't have a chance against Newsom. He actually won at the height of his popularity with only 2.3 million votes out of 22 million. And if you don't vote, you are actually setting us up for a rigged election. You are setting us up for someone out there and, doing things they shouldn't. So I go back to that's why the media they're complicit in not letting you know about the primary, because they don't want you voting. They want the extremes, so that when it comes time in the general, the die's been cast. So what I've discovered is that when we tell people that Newsom did not win with the mandate, he got a tiny fraction of the voters. This is the most important primary. It's more important than the general. And if you don't vote, it's much easier to rig. People are like, what? I didn't know that. So it's about educating people.
So I want to shift now to kind of taking your 7-generation principle and talk about applying it to some of your issues. You have a lot of issues here on your site, but I wanted to touch upon a couple of them. Let's start off with one of the biggest ones, especially that came out of COVID, is education. So how do we prepare California for 7 generations when it comes to education?
Well, first and foremost, we have to understand the history of public education and know that there are a lot of beautiful things do come out of education, but the system was originally designed by the Carnegies and the Rockefellers for basically 2 goals: was to remove all dissent from the individual, any possibility of dissent, and also to remove the originality. They wanted an unquestioning workforce, period. And so that's where it started. Now, ever since then, though, education's even declined more and more over time. And now we don't have music, right? We don't have the physical education that we used to have. We don't have, like home economics, how to learn how to make things, fix things, create things like mechanical, electrical, carpentry, all these different things, right? It's all about standardized tests, And it's not about making better humans. So what we want to do is we want to bring back the humanity into the education system, right? So first and foremost, most children, whether you want to admit it or not, have some form of trauma or some struggle because of the last 2 years. Some are worse than others, depending on a whole host of different reasons. But what we need to do is just remove standardized testing, at least for the next 2 years, if not forever. They're a big money-making scheme that only stresses children out and is not actually reflective of their education, who they are, and how well they're advancing. So there's that. We need to bring back the trades. We need to bring back so children know how to make things and fix things, and not be so hyper-focused on, you got to go and get the master's degree. You got to go off and seek higher education, spend tens of thousands of dollars. Now we know what happens. We have all these young people, young adults, who are now living in their parents' home with this huge student loan debt that was going to be forgiven by Biden. Instead, they're getting, crack pipes. And the objective is to say, look, you guys, we need to bring the trades back. You need to know how to make things and fix things and use your hands. It's actually a very respectable field, And so bring that back. And the other thing is get the children off the screens. Screens are not a great way to learn. The lessons don't stick. Actually, these screens are very unhealthy for young people. Their eyes, the radio frequencies, the emissions that come off are very bad, especially for developing bodies. Get the children more physical education, get them outside, outdoors more, right? And also let's lower the administrative cost. Most of money that goes to the schools is going to the administration. And then really allow school choice, whether it's school, little pods, homeschooling, public school, private school. Parents more than anyone else know their children, right? Than anyone. And we need to let the parents actually pick, or let the children pick for themselves. And so really the objective here right now is to simply make better humans at the end of 12 years.
So it comes down to, and I agree with that, the public education has become a lot of just grinding people through, especially with the No Child Left Behind, a lot of these standardized testing. It's basically just numbers, and it's not about really how much useful knowledge you learn. It's how much you can fill out a bubble and just regurgitate information.
Yeah, it's been a pipeline for the student. It's been a pipeline to indebtedness.
Yeah, especially with colleges. I think If I could do it all over again, I don't know if I would have gone to a 4-year college if there were other options, such as if you could go to like a free trade school. I think that should be vocational schools. There should be an incentive to send people to vocational schools, have the state pay for them. I'm all for that.
Right.
There needs to be more hands-on.
And bring back, music, art, theater. This stimulates the brain. It's great for development and education, right? We know this, music especially. Bring back some cursive writing, for God's sake. I mean, the fact that children not only know how to write cursive, they don't even know how to write a word, many of them, or finish a sentence by the time they graduate from high school. How can this even be happening these days? So, I have to be honest. When I look at our world, we're pretty much in a relationship crisis with everything around us. And we've got these middlemen everywhere. They're in our banking system, our food, our education, even our religion, there's middlemen everywhere. And we need to get rid of the middlemen, right? And just bring it back home, make it as local and regional as possible, bring that power back and the authority back. And when it comes to education, it's really about just being hands-on and person-to-person learning. And again, trying to make better humans. And so, I'm just so saddened by the education system. And I'm really saddened for the children right now. This has been a massive experiment, and it's all on their shoulders right now. So we have a big responsibility before us, and I don't want to let them down. Not on my watch.
So obviously, good, well-educated children turn into well-educated workers in your economy. You had talked about this with the infrastructure bank. What's your principles moving forward with the economy and business? Because we know California is not particularly business friendly. So what is your plan for the economy and the businesses here in California?
Good question. Well, it's very much tied into the cost of living. So first and foremost, when it comes to the taxes, we're being absolutely bled dry. We are the most taxed state in the United States. We see very little of this money. In fact, I've lost track of how many hundreds of millions of dollars that have been promised for the homeless, promised for our forest restoration, and we don't see the money. The money's going somewhere, but it's not going to what it was earmarked for. So I think to really start this, what we need to do is a massive third-party certified financial and operational audit on the biggest offenders, the biggest budgets. And we start there, because the best thing we can do is stop the hemorrhage, reduce the taxes. So I'm not saying we're getting rid of all the different programs and projects and agencies that we might be able to. We might find out they're not that necessary, they're not doing anything. But the objective is to reduce all of the overhead for the taxes to begin with by auditing. So then right there, you lower that. Once you lower that down, then guess what? The cost of living goes down, because if you're paying for more for taxes, guess who pays for that? The customers. The Californians. I mean, who do you think is paying for those taxes? In the end, it's always the customers, right? So whether you're going and buying a home, or you're buying products for your home, or you're putting food on the table, it's going to cost more because you're paying higher in taxes. So let's just lower the taxes all the way around. And then the other thing is to reboot the local regional economies, because it's so important to have these local economies where the dollar is circulating. It's called the economic multiplier effect, right? If you have local businesses, that means it's going to the publisher, it's going to the editor, it's going to the contractor, right? And that dollar is circulating around and around in the economies. That's really healthy for a vibrant economy. So what we're doing is we're outsourcing all of our business. And so I've been saying to people, what COVID has taught us is that at this point in time, the global economy that we had before this, order something the next day it's here, that's not going to be what it used to be. And so we have to go from being generations of what we were many years ago. We were generations of producers. Then we were transitioned into generations of consumers. And that was by design, right? All of the manufacturing, all the stuff was exported for cheap labor, no environmental regulations, right? No red tape. And we became consumers. Well, that's just not going to fly any longer. So we've got to actually look at our world and say, okay, what are my skills? What are my assets? What can I produce? How can I go from being a consumer to being a producer? It might be a skill. It might be something you grow or you make, right? Or you want to go out there and you want to educate yourself and learn that skill. So there's that. And then the other thing is too, around cost of living. Housing is a real huge one. And, we've got to cut back on all the red tape at the expense of just breaking ground to start building in the first place. But even more importantly, I think we have to be really smart with the building materials and start actually talking about that. Like, look at how do we actually start using building materials that fit the actual respective area? Like, for instance, up in this area, I'm in a stick building, great, with these forests ready to burn down at any moment. Why not hempcrete? Why not super adobe? Why not Cobb? Why not really encourage and educate people on these alternative, building materials that are more locally resourced, that are better for fighting against fires, that are actually cheaper. You can make smaller and a lot cheaper. And so there's a lot that we can be doing. And I say to folks, the only reason why this is not being done is because of the leadership or the lack thereof. So again, start at the top, reduce the taxes, stimulate the local economies, bring the jobs back. And we can do a lot of that with the infrastructure bank by doing a lot of infrastructure jobs up and down the state, right? That creates this vitality. And then also look at how do we reduce the cost of living around housing. And a lot of that, you can do that by lowering the cost of building in the first place, and then looking at what kind of materials we use to build our homes.
You'd brought up homelessness, and homelessness is definitely tied in with housing and the economy and taxes as a result of people who cannot afford to live here in California. And you call it on your site a humanitarian crisis, and that you will immediately declare a state of emergency. Can you go into what you would do under a state of emergency?
Sure. Well, the fact that we have 160,000 plus people in crises on our streets out of 40 million and we can't solve it is just beyond me. So first and foremost, yes, declare a state of emergency around this humanitarian crisis. And then the next thing we do is we actually do a triage essentially on the streets. So what we do is we go out there, and as we're doing that triage, we also loosen the building codes around the buildings we already have. We have a lot of empty commercial buildings that are not being used because of COVID. Try to find some of these commercial buildings nearest to where the homeless are, so you're not exporting the homeless to another area, and actually retrofit them for mental and facilities and drug rehabilitation centers, for low-income housing, for interim housing. While that's happening, that's when we conduct the triage on the streets. And we go and we connect with a continuum of cares. Many counties have these continuum of cares, which is basically a table, a circle of many of the local agencies and nonprofits and so on that come together per county. So you get together the continuum of cares, you get together with the housing and the shelters, the homeless shelters, and you pull the data and you do a triage and you identify who is most at risk to themselves and their surrounding businesses and residences. And then you get them off the streets and you put them into these facilities for wraparound services so they can actually start to reclaim their lives. They're in crises. And when I hear people say, oh, they're choosing to be there, it's their right to be there, most of them are completely drugged up or drunk or psychologically they don't even know where they are. They're in a crisis. It's our responsibility to take care of them and get them the services they need. Then we have those who are just down on their luck. They've lost their home, their house, they're living in an RV, they're living in a car. And so we need to also get them into the interim housing and identify what kind of jobs do they want, get them the skills that they need, and then help them find the jobs and land a place to live. Now, I have had people saying, how are you going to get everyone off the streets? You can't, that's not legal. It is legal if we give them a place to live. And this is by a Supreme Court decision. So there's many beautiful models out there. One of my favorites is a place called Haven for Hope. And it's actually in San Antonio, Texas. And they have 22 acres. And in that 22 acres of wooded area, they, in the very center, have this incredible center of nonprofits, over 180 different nonprofits. It's kind of like one-stop shopping for the homeless. And the reason why they're doing this is, as a homeless individual, somebody who's without a house, they many times don't have a car, they don't have money, don't even know what day it is, for them to go across town to get to an appointment or go here to get this or their drugs or medication, they don't have that capacity. That's not even realistic. So by having all these nonprofits in one central location, that those who are homeless actually have access. Now they can go in, they'll get the food, they'll have a bed to sleep in, right? And then if they don't want to, that's okay. You can actually take your tents, you can take your tarps, and you have 22 acres of wooded area to camp in. But you can no longer camp on the streets. You can't camp under the bridges. We're going to give you a place, and you can stay there until the day you want to no longer be homeless, or the day you just are no longer on the earth. But you can't be out on the streets any longer. And if you so choose, at any time you want to go into the center and receive those services, it's available to you.
I want to touch upon they're kind of interrelated, and it's agriculture and an issue that I found that California has completely screwed up. Leave it to California to screw up a golden opportunity, and that's the cannabis industry. I did some work early on in my legal career trying to work with clients, setting up cannabis businesses and get them through the licensing. But I have found that the business is basically dried up, that a lot of people who came to me, I would tell them the realities. I would say, unless you have $3 to $5 million in the bank, there's no way you're starting any cannabis business. And I feel like we've dropped the ball on a golden opportunity that could have been, in your words, on a green renaissance. That could have been a huge booming economic sector of our economy, alongside agriculture, which I believe we also need to help and not forget about our farmers. So whichever one you want to start with.
Right. Okay, let's start talking about cannabis. So I was actually on the city council when we were working on the cannabis ordinance. It is the most punitive, egregious, red tape filled piece of work I've ever seen. I have never in my life seen something that was just so over the top ridiculous. And it's because of people's fear. They're like, oh, we're going to bring in these dispensaries, we're going to bring in these labs, these businesses, these boutiques, and we're going to break out in lawlessness. Well, we now have a dispensary here in downtown Nevada City. We're the first in this county to do this, and leave it to a tiny little town like ours to pull it off. But we did. Everyone else just stood around to see how we were going to do and do all the heavy lifting. And that dispensary pretty much saved us as far as during this last 2 years with the downturn in the economy. Now, what it has proven to us is that we've actually had no issues whatsoever. It's been actually really wonderful. I have no doubt, and let me tell you, I saw a lot of discrepancies and a lot of foul play behind the scenes of building and identifying who the dispensary was going to be. There's a lot of, I'm sure, money exchanging hands. But I knew then that these ordinances and the red tape were there by design to destroy the mom and pop industries and even the mid-size, mid-level cannabis businesses, to make room for the Marlboros and Big Pharma to come in and absolutely capture that industry. And here we are a few years later, and we do have all these mom and pop businesses that have just fallen to the wayside. The farmers are gone. The land has lost value, but even more importantly, the multi-million-dollar businesses who had a little bit of money to do something, they too are not surviving. This is 100% by design. So what they did is very much like other legislation. They say, oh, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be fantastic. But they designed it in such a way that it's actually going to destroy the very industry it should be supporting. And that's where we are today. So now when it comes to farming, we know the monocrops aren't good. We go up and down the farmlands. What's happening is that we've targeted the farmers and we're saying, oh, they're taking all of our water and we can't allow them to have any more water to grow our food. It's insane. What they're not telling you is that, can the farmers be better, more efficient, and conserve more water? Of course they can, sure. But are they the reason? Not at all. We don't talk about the data centers. We don't talk about the big industries. Data centers like Facebook, Google, right? In the cloud, that takes tons and tons of water to cool all of their computers, and that water just disappears. We should be capturing that evaporated water and that steam, right? And recycling it, but we're not. So they're burning off all this water for all of our cloud services out there, for all of our computers, right, for the internet, while the farmers are being targeted and these big corporations are coming in, the BlackRocks, the Blackstones, the Vanguards, and the farmers can't farm, and these businesses are coming in, scooping them up, pennies on the dollar, and taking their water rights simultaneously. This too is by design. So if we can have the infrastructure bank, one of the best things we can do to conserve water and to make sure that these are actually viable, productive farms, is we have many examples out there where farmers have gone out onto the land that is absolutely fallowed. It's not soil, it's just dirt. And what they've done is they've transitioned into something that is more regenerative farming. And what it does, it imitates the earth. It's a closed loop system essentially, right? So you use farm animals and you rebuild the topsoil and you use your plants and you use your food waste and it's a closed loop system that really that makes it all encompassing, and you're not dependent upon outside chemicals and other things, and which costs a lot of money and is now not very available. And it greatly decreases, we're talking like 50% of your water usage, while increasing your yield, your production yield, by hundreds and hundreds of percent. So I've actually been with the farmers. I've seen their books. I've seen their P&L, and they're using much less water, and their yield is far, far, far greater. So that's where the infrastructure bank should be, where they can help these big agriculture farms, the big ag monocrops, go in, get the education, use the California Conservation Corps, by the way, to help them, have them come in, help them in the transition, use the infrastructure bank to actually finance it, and also help them that little transition time into being more sustainable and more regenerative as well. And so right now there is a war. There is a full-on war against our farmers. They're coming for our water, and they're also going after our housing stock as well.
Last item I wanted to touch upon, and I put your site at the bottom here of the video, so that if anybody wants to go and read everything, there's a lot to read there. It's very comprehensive. Is energy itself, and even down here, the first hot day we had here in San Diego, I was in the middle of work. It was 3 o'clock. Power went completely out, which you would think in a major metropolitan city in the United States of America should never happen, but because it got a little hot, probably about 78 degrees, power went out, and that was it. I was done with work for the day. So
yeah, we're being held hostage by these energy companies, and I'm just not going to mince any words. I consider like PG&E to be nothing short of a terrorist organization, and I wish I was kidding. But interestingly enough, PG&E was actually signed into existence about 4 blocks from me here in downtown Nevada City, and they are actually whiplashing us. And instead of taking the money and actually, investing it into hardening the lines, into making sure they're cleaning out the forests and restoring them and so on, and ensuring that we actually have really good strong power poles and so on, and also insulating them. They're sending all that money off to their shareholders on Wall Street. So this is all because of them. The reason why we're having power outages is because of their greed, is because they are a monopoly. Same as Southern Edison. And they need to be broken up. And Newsom had the ability just a few years ago to break them up when PG&E, I should say, was in bankruptcy. He was talking all tough, but of course PG&E is a huge funder, big donor for his campaign. So he didn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. These monopolies should not be allowed. We should be decentralizing our whole entire energy grid. We should be having joint power authorities where we have different regions, according to their geography, create their own power grid. They produce their own energy, and they can take that money, that surplus money, and reinvest it back into watershed and forest restoration. They can reinvest it back into hardening up the whole entire grid. And also, I really want to see a renaissance around energy as well, because right now we're so dependent upon fossil fuels, even though Biden, of course, has just eviscerated that, and he's sending us into a hellhole because of his leadership. But while we're on fossil fuels, we should be actually going out there and really pushing research and development and getting to market zero-point energy, right? Using magnets, right? There's all these different things that we know the oil companies have been purchasing. You can see there's many documentaries and books on this. They've been purchasing these Nikola Tesla type products, right? And shelving them, right? We have like bullet trains in Japan and China. They're using magnets. And so this is the stuff that we absolutely need to explore. And I want to encourage that. And so it's not just like it's like we've got one answer. It's like it's a series of silver BBs, essentially. But as it currently stands, these power companies, no doubt, are holding us hostage. And the fact that they're turning off our power so simply like that, it sounds like we're more like in a third world country, and how dare they do that to us is absolutely criminal.
Yeah, and even down here, we have SDG&E, and without warning, I think it was January, we saw our electric bill double just in 1 month. And they said, well, it's because of COVID, it's because of all these different things and the supply chain and all that. But it doubled, and our mayor, of course, who shrugged his shoulder at one point, he patted himself on the back for signing a great deal with SDG&E, and then when this happened, he turns around and goes, well, I have no control over SDG&E. So he's talking out both sides of his mouth. It's they're in bed with the like you're saying, they're in bed with these energy companies, but then when the energy companies are bad for the people, they turn around and go, oh, I don't know, I have no control over that. So
well, and now they're trying to push onto us these whole entire smart cities, the carbon tax, and saying we're going to tackle climate change by doing all this stuff. Like, if you want to tackle climate change, then build your topsoil. Actually, rebuilding your topsoil is a great way to create carbon sinks and put the water back into the soil and the forest and to recharge the aquifers. And so when I hear that these power companies, Qualcomm, which is in your area, right, and the technocrats, Silicon Valley, they want us to be in this whole digital, ID passport where you can't go anywhere, do anything without them knowing everything and basically essentially controlling everything you do. So I'm telling people, this is why you need to vote in the primary. We're talking in just a few days, the trajectory of your life is going to be set in a certain direction. And within that envelope of your ballot contains your future. And if you don't check off a few boxes and make some real clean, educated decisions, yeah, I'm going to do what I'm going to do to help the state, but it's going to make it a lot harder for all of us. And so this whole smart cities is the answer. It's not the answer. It's if you want to know what we're going to look like, just look at what's happening right now in China. Look at their lockdowns. Look at their whole entire credit system, right? Social credit system. If you're on the wrong websites, if you're associating with the wrong people, if you're with the wrong party affiliation, anything like that, your credit score goes down and you can't go on planes or trains or leave your apartment or go to college or get a loan. Your life, you are in an open air prison. And that's what our government, that's what the entities like Qualcomm, that is like the technocrats and Silicon Valley, the Bill Gates, the Soros, the World Economic Forum, the Klaus Schwab. This is what they all want. And they're using COVID as the excuse to break us, economically break us, destroy us from the inside out. Death by 1,000 cuts is the art of war, while putting in, the problem reaction solution. Oh, the solution is the digital passport. And that's how we're going to solve all this. And oh, by the way, you're all going to live in smart cities and be radiated by, 5G millimeter wave, which, by the way, San Diego Union Tribune would not actually let me emphatically put up there that the millimeter wave is actually very unhealthy for you. They actually maybe retract that.
Well, I think we got a lot covered in this episode. We were chatting beforehand and we talked about with the time limit, and it's about, I said at minimum I like to hit 40 minutes, about an hour. And I said, I don't think we'll have any trouble hitting an hour. So final points, where can people find you and learn more about you?
Elect Reinette. So of course it's ELECT, elect, and then Reinette is REINETTEREINETTE.com, electronet.com. Yeah, please spread the word. Please go out there, find people who are not voting, tell them how important it is. Yes, I do need donations because we do not have any big corporate donors whatsoever or NGOs giving us money. And let people know this is the most important election in the history of California, and most people don't even know. So I just want to say thank you to you for making this time and this space available for me to reach the people I can't because I'm being so censored. So thank you.
Well, glad you came on. It was a great conversation. So to everyone else for tuning in, thanks for tuning in. As always, as I always like to say at the end of these episodes, if you enjoyed it, text one person and let them know that you enjoyed this episode and share it with them. If you want to support the platform, you can go check out merchandise, Patreon, and all that stuff. And that's basically it. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot, Reinette.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.